How did a simple, lovingly wrapped lunch from my mother-in-law become the turning point in a war for control, loyalty, and legacy? This morning, I learned the difference between a gift and a trap, and by nightfall, I signed the contract that destroyed the very company she tried to save. And can a calm outsider rewrite the rules when everyone thinks they've already won? The kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and lavender soap when I walked in that Tuesday morning. Evelyn Pryce stood at the marble counter, her silver hair pulled back in that perfect chignon she'd worn for as long as I'd known her. She was wrapping something in crisp white paper, her movements precise and deliberate. "Nathan, dear," she said without looking up, "I've prepared your lunch for today." I paused in the doorway, coffee mug halfway to my lips. In 6 years of marriage to her daughter Lauren, Evelyn had never once made me lunch. She barely acknowledged my presence at family dinners, let alone showed any maternal concern for my daily nutrition. "That's thoughtful of you," I managed, setting down my mug on the granite island that probably cost more than my first car. She turned, holding out a perfectly wrapped package tied with a small blue ribbon. The paper was expensive, the kind you'd use for a wedding gift, not a turkey sandwich. Her smile was warm, but something flickered behind her pale blue eyes that made my stomach tighten. "It's important to eat well, especially today," she said, pressing the package into my hands. "You have that big meeting, don't you? The contract signing?" My fingers closed around the package. It was heavier than I'd expected, and warm. "How did you know about that?" "Lauren mentioned it, of course." Evelyn's smile widened. "We're all so proud of you, Nathan. Such an important day for the company." Lauren appeared in the doorway then, her auburn hair still tousled from sleep. She wore a silk robe that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, a reminder of the world I'd married into but never quite belonged to. "Morning," she mumbled, heading straight for the coffee maker without looking at either of us. "I was just telling Nathan how proud we are," Evelyn said, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she wanted to sound sincere but couldn't quite manage it. Lauren's hand paused on the coffee pot handle. "Right. The meeting." The silence stretched uncomfortably. I'd grown used to these moments. The careful words, the things left unsaid, the way conversations seemed to happen around me rather than with me, but today felt different. Today felt deliberate. "Well," I said, tucking the lunch into my briefcase, "I should get going. Don't want to be late." "Of course not," Evelyn said. "That would be unfortunate." I kissed Lauren goodbye, a quick peck on the cheek that she barely acknowledged, and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard Evelyn's voice, low and urgent, but I couldn't make out the words. The bus stop was crowded with the usual morning commuters, all of us clutching coffee cups and checking phones, pretending we weren't all thinking about how much we hated our jobs. I found a spot on the bench and pulled out my phone to review my notes for the meeting. This contract was everything. 6 months of negotiations with Hartwell Industries, a deal that would secure Pryce Industries' future and, more importantly, prove that I belonged in this family business. Walter Pryce, my father-in-law and CEO, had made it clear that my position depended on closing this deal. No pressure. "Excuse me, sir?" I looked up to find a young woman standing in front of me. She couldn't have been more than 19, with wild curly hair and eyes that seemed too old for her face. She wore layers of colorful scarves and had what looked like tarot cards peeking out of her jacket pocket. "I'm sorry," she said, "but I haven't eaten in 2 days. Could you spare anything?" Without thinking, I reached into my briefcase and pulled out Evelyn's carefully wrapped lunch. "Here," I said, holding it out to her. "Take this." She reached for it, then stopped. Her fingers hovered over the package, and her expression changed. Those 2 old eyes focused on something I couldn't see. "No," she said, stepping back. "I won't eat this, and I won't let you either." Her voice was steady, certain. "You always focus on the pretty wrapping." My stomach dropped. The words hit me like a physical blow, though I couldn't explain why. "What did you say?" "The wrapping is beautiful," she continued, staring at the package in my hands. "Perfect, expensive. But what's inside?" She shook her head. "What's inside will hurt you." I stared at her, then at the lunch in my hands. The white paper suddenly looked less elegant and more like a shroud. The blue ribbon seemed to mock me with its cheerful color. "I don't understand," I said. "You will." She met my eyes, and I saw something there. Pity, maybe, or recognition. "Be careful today, Nathan Keller. They think you're weak because you're kind. They think you're stupid because you trust. But you're not, are you?" She knew my name. I'd never seen this woman before in my life, but she knew my name. "How do you—" But she was already walking away, disappearing into the crowd of commuters like she'd never been there at all. I sat on that bench for another 10 minutes, staring at the lunch in my hands. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Looking forward to seeing how you handle today's meeting. The bus arrived and I got on, still clutching the package. But I didn't eat it. Something about the girl's words, about the certainty in her voice, made me slide it back into my briefcase untouched. At the office, the usual suspects were already gathered around the coffee machine, their voices carrying across the open floor plan. Victor Nash, one of the board members and Evelyn's longtime friend, was holding court as usual. "Nathan's big day," he was saying with that particular smirk he reserved for me. "Hope he's feeling up to it?" The others laughed, that polite corporate laugh that meant nothing and everything at the same time. I walked past them to my office, feeling their eyes follow me. "Morning, Nathan," called Sylvie Linwood from her cubicle. She was one of the few people in the office who treated me like an actual human being rather than an unwelcome intruder. "Ready for the big meeting?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, trying to keep my voice light. But I wasn't ready. Something was wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling that everyone knew it but me. In the cafeteria later that morning, I overheard fragments of conversations that made my paranoia spike. If he doesn't show up, Walter's backup plan. About time someone else got a chance. I pushed the food around on my plate, my appetite gone. The lunch from Evelyn sat in my briefcase like a ticking bomb. Every time I thought about eating it, I heard that girl's voice. "I won't let you either." My phone buzzed again. This time it was a calendar reminder for the 2 p.m. meeting. But underneath the meeting details, someone had added a note. "Hope you're feeling well." I wasn't feeling well. I was feeling like a pawn in a game I didn't understand, moving across a board where everyone else knew the rules except me. That afternoon, I found myself thinking about how I'd gotten here. 6 years ago, I was Nathan Keller, mid-level marketing executive at a small firm, happy with my quiet life and modest ambitions. Then I met Lauren at a charity gala, one of those events where people in expensive clothes write checks to feel better about their expensive lives. She was beautiful, of course. Auburn hair that caught the light, green eyes that seemed to see right through you, and that particular confidence that comes from never having to worry about money. But what drew me to her wasn't her looks or her family's wealth. It was the sadness I glimpsed when she thought no one was watching. "You don't belong here either, do you?" she'd said, appearing beside me at the bar while I nursed a whiskey and watched the crowd. "That obvious?" "The good ones never do." She'd smiled then, and for a moment the sadness lifted. "I'm Lauren." "Nathan." "Well, Nathan, would you like to escape this circus with me?" I should have known then that escape was an illusion in the Pryce family. There was no leaving, only deeper entanglement. The courtship was a whirlwind of expensive restaurants and weekend getaways, private boxes at the theater, and vacations to places I'd only seen in magazines. Lauren was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions. For the first time in my life, I felt special. Meeting the family was educational. Walter Pryce was exactly what you'd expect from a CEO who'd inherited his position, confident to the point of arrogance, charming when it served him, and utterly convinced of his own superiority. He had the kind of handshake that was designed to establish dominance, and eyes that assessed your net worth within seconds of meeting you. "So, you're the young man who's captured our Lauren's attention," he'd said that first night at dinner, sizing me up over his wine glass. "Marketing, is it? How practical." Evelyn had been more subtle, but no less clear in her assessment. She'd asked all the right questions about my family, my education, my career prospects, each inquiry feeling like a job interview I was destined to fail. "Nathan's very talented," Lauren had said, reaching for my hand across the table. "He has such interesting ideas about brand positioning." "I'm sure he does," Evelyn had replied with a smile that never reached her eyes. But Lauren loved me, or said she did, and when you're 32 and starting to think you might end up alone, love feels like enough. When she proposed, yes, she proposed at another charity gala with a ring that probably cost more than my annual salary, I said yes without thinking about the strings attached. The wedding was a Pryce production, naturally. 300 guests, most of whom I'd never met. A venue that required a year-long waiting list. Flowers flown in from some exotic location I couldn't pronounce. I felt like an actor in someone else's play, reciting lines I'd never rehearsed. "Welcome to the family," Walter had said during his toast, raising his champagne glass. "We're so pleased to have you join the Pryce legacy." The word legacy should have been my first warning. Within 6 months of the wedding, I was working at Pryce Industries. "It makes sense," Lauren had said. "You're family now, and your marketing background could really help the company." What she didn't mention was that helping the company meant being the perpetual outsider, the one who got the difficult assignments and the impossible deadlines, the one whose ideas were implemented without credit and whose mistakes were magnified beyond proportion. Victor Nash made sure I understood my place from day one. Family business can be tricky, he'd said, cornering me by the elevator during my first week. Lots of expectations. Wouldn't want you to get in over your head. The meaning was unmistakable. I was accepted out of convenience, and not embraced. Needed, but never truly appreciated. A price by marriage, yet never considered one of their own. The pattern established itself quickly. At family dinners, conversations would stop when I entered the room, then resume on topics I knew nothing about. At work, I'd be excluded from meetings that directly affected my projects, then criticized for not being informed. Lauren would nod sympathetically when I complained, but nothing ever changed. They just need time to adjust, she'd say. Change is hard for them. But it had been 6 years, and nothing had adjusted except my expectations. The real revelation came during a family dinner last month. I'd excused myself to take a call and returned to find Walter and Evelyn deep in conversation with Lauren. "A temporary arrangement," Walter was saying. "Until we can find someone more suitable," Evelyn added. Lauren saw me first, and the color drained from her face. The conversation stopped abruptly, and everyone suddenly became very interested in their dessert. "Don't mind us," Walter said with forced cheerfulness. "Just boring business talk." But I'd heard enough. I was the temporary arrangement, the placeholder, the convenient solution until something better came along. That night, I'd watched Lauren in the mirror as she got ready for bed. Or she was crying, quiet, careful tears that she wiped away before turning around. "Lauren," I'd said, "is everything okay?" "Fine," she'd replied, not meeting my eyes. "Just tired." But she'd clutched her phone like a lifeline, and when she thought I was asleep, I heard her typing messages late into the night. Now, sitting in my office with that perfectly wrapped lunch in my briefcase, I understood what I should have realized years ago. I wasn't paranoid. I was finally paying attention. The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 1:45, my stomach started cramping. Nothing severe, just enough to make me wonder if I was getting sick. I thought about the lunch again, about the girl's warning, about the way Evelyn had smiled when she handed it to me. At 1:50, Victor Nash appeared in my doorway. "Feeling all right, Nathan?" he asked with false concern. "You look a bit pale." "I'm fine," I said, standing up and grabbing my files. Good. Wouldn't want anything to interfere with such an important meeting." The way he said it made my skin crawl, like he was expecting something to interfere, like he was counting on it. I made it to the boardroom just as the Hartwell representatives arrived. The room was full of Pryce Industries' key players, Walter at the head of the table, Evelyn beside him, despite not holding an official position, Victor and the other board members arranged like a jury. "Nathan," Walter said, standing to greet our guests. "Right on time." But I caught the look that passed between him and Evelyn. Surprise, maybe, or disappointment. The meeting proceeded normally at first. We went over the contract terms, discussed implementation timelines, addressed final concerns. But I noticed the way the Pryce family members kept glancing at the clock, the way Victor kept checking his phone. They were waiting for something that wasn't happening. "Well then," said Harold Hartwell, the lead negotiator, "I think we're ready to move forward. Nathan, I believe you have signature authority for this contract?" All eyes turned to me. Walter's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Evelyn's fingers drummed once against the table. "Yes," I said, "I do." And that's when I realized what they'd been planning. If I'd eaten that lunch, if I'd gotten sick and missed this meeting, the contract would have defaulted to Walter's backup plan. And Walter's backup plan, I was suddenly certain, involved his own company. Pryce Holdings, the family's other business venture. "Excellent," Harold continued. "Then we can finalize everything today." I signed the contract with a steady hand, watching Walter's face as I did. He smiled and shook hands with the Hartwell team, played the part of the pleased CEO, but his eyes were cold when they met mine. After the meeting, as the Hartwell representatives left, Walter lingered. "Good work today, Nathan," he said, "though I have to say I'm surprised you were feeling well enough to attend." "Why wouldn't I be?" "Oh, no reason. Just thought you might be under the weather." Evelyn appeared beside him, her smile sharp as glass. "We were so worried when you didn't answer your phone this morning." I hadn't missed any calls. I checked my phone obsessively. "Must have been a poor connection," I said. "Must have been," she agreed. That evening, Lauren was unusually quiet during dinner. She pushed her food around her plate and avoided my eyes, answering questions with single words. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine." "You seem upset." "I'm not upset." But she was. And when I woke up in the middle of the night, She was sitting by the window, staring out at the garden with tears streaming down her face. "Lauren?" She wiped her eyes quickly. "Go back to sleep, Nathan." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. Everything was very, very wrong. And tomorrow, I was going to start figuring out exactly how wrong it was. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that girl's face, heard her voice. You always focus on the pretty wrapping. By morning, I'd made a decision. If the Pryce family wanted to play games, I needed to learn the rules. The first thing I did was take that lunch to my doctor. Dr. Patricia Hendricks had been my physician for 8 years, long before I'd married into money and influence. She was one of the few people in my life who treated me exactly the same as she always had. "You want me to test a sandwich?" she said, raising an eyebrow as I sat in her office with Evelyn's carefully wrapped package. "I know how it sounds," I said. "But something's not right. I need to know what's in this." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, we can run a full toxicology panel. But Nathan, if you really think someone is trying to poison you, maybe you should be talking to the police, not me. I need proof first." "Fair enough. We'll have results in 48 hours. Leaving the doctor's office, I felt both paranoid and vindicated. Either I was losing my mind, or I was finally seeing clearly. Given the events of the past few days, I was betting on the latter. At work, I started paying attention to things I'd previously ignored. The way conversation stopped when I approached. The way Victor Nash always seemed to know about meetings I hadn't been invited to. The way certain emails seemed to disappear from my inbox. I began saving everything. Every email, every document, every casual comment that seemed innocent but felt loaded with meaning. I created a private folder on my personal cloud storage and started building a timeline. Sylvie Linwood noticed my new attention to detail. "You're being very thorough lately," she said, stopping by my office with a stack of reports. "Just trying to stay on top of things," I replied. She glanced around, then stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Nathan, I probably shouldn't say this, but be careful. There's been talk." "What kind of talk?" "The kind that happens in corners when people think no one's listening. About your position here. About whether you're really suited for the family business." A chill swept through me. "Who's talking?" "Does it matter? The point is, they're circling, and I like you too much to watch you get blindsided." That afternoon, I had lunch with Miles Barrett, my former colleague and current business partner in a small consulting firm we'd started as a side project. Miles was one of the few people who knew me before I became Nathan Pryce by marriage. "You look like hell," he said, as we sat down at a quiet corner table in a restaurant far from Pryce Industries. "Feel like it too," I admitted. "Miles, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Shoot." "Do you think I'm paranoid?" He considered this seriously. "About what?" "About my in-laws trying to sabotage me, about being set up to fail, about—" I paused, realizing how crazy the next part would sound. "About someone trying to poison me." Miles set down his sandwich and stared at me. "Jesus, Nathan, what's going on?" I told him everything. The lunch, the girl at the bus stop, the pattern of exclusion and manipulation, the way everyone seemed surprised I'd made it to the meeting yesterday. When I finished, Miles was quiet for a long time. "You know what the worst part is?" he finally said. "What?" "None of it surprises me. I've been watching you get ground down by that family for 6 years. The only thing that surprises me is that you're finally fighting back." "I'm not fighting back. I'm just trying to understand what's happening." "Same thing, in your case." Miles leaned forward. "Nathan, you're one of the smartest, most capable people I know. But you've spent so long trying to prove yourself worthy of their acceptance that you've forgotten you don't need their approval to have value. It's not that simple. Lauren chose them over you a long time ago. You just haven't wanted to admit it." The words hit harder because they were true. Oh, I'd seen the evidence for years but refused to process it. Lauren's silence during family conflicts. Her failure to defend me. Her tears that she hid from me but never from them. "What do?" I asked. "You document everything. You prepare for war. And when they make their move, you make sure you're ready with a better one." That evening, I called Rita Samuels, the family lawyer who'd handled my prenup and various other legal matters over the years. Rita was old-school professional, sharp, discreet, and utterly unflappable. "Nathan," she said when I reached her at home, "this is unexpected. What can I do for you?" "I need to understand my position at Pryce Industries, legally speaking." "In what sense?" "Contract authority, voting rights. What power do I actually have versus what I think I have?" There was a pause. "This is a rather unusual question. Is there something specific you're concerned about? Maybe. I'd rather not get into details over the phone. Of course. Can you come in tomorrow morning? Say 8 a.m.? I'll be there. Nathan? Rita's voice was carefully neutral. Whatever's happening, be very careful. The Pryce family has a long memory and considerable resources. Is that a warning or a threat? It's advice from someone who's known them longer than you have. I hung up feeling both reassured and terrified. At least I wasn't completely powerless. But power, I was learning, was only useful if you knew how to wield it. That night at dinner, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Walter dominated the conversation with stories about his golf game and complaints about city politics. Evelyn smiled and nodded and made all the right responses. Lauren picked at her food and said nothing. Nathan, Walter said suddenly, I've been thinking about your role at the company. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. Oh? Yes. I think it might be time for some adjustments, new challenges, perhaps. What kind of adjustments? Well, the Hartwell contract is signed now. Perhaps it's time to move you to a different department, something more suited to your particular skills. The way he said particular skills made it clear he didn't think I had any. I'm happy where I am, I said. Of course. But sometimes what makes us happy isn't what's best for the company. Evelyn reached across the table and patted my hand with false sympathy. Change can be difficult, dear, but it's often for the best. Lauren still said nothing. After dinner, I found her in our bedroom, staring at her phone with that same expression of barely contained distress I'd been seeing more and more often. Lauren, I said, sitting on the bed beside her, we need to talk. She didn't look up. About what? About what's happening. About your parents' plans for my future at the company. About why you never defend me anymore. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do? I reached out and gently turned her face toward me. I love you, Lauren, but I can't keep pretending I don't see what's happening. For a moment, her mask slipped. I saw pain there, and guilt, and something that might have been regret. It's complicated, she whispered. Then uncomplicate it. Talk to me. But she was already pulling away, the mask sliding back into place. I'm tired, Nathan. Can we talk about this tomorrow? We both knew we wouldn't. The next morning, Dr. Hendricks called with the test results. Nathan, she said, her voice grim, you need to come in, now. What did you find? Not over the phone. How soon can you be here? I was there in 20 minutes. The sandwich showed elevated amounts of ipecac syrup, she said without hesitation, enough to trigger intense nausea, repeated vomiting, and serious intestinal distress. Not enough to put your life at risk, but more than enough to leave you severely unwell for several hours. The room seemed to tilt. Someone really tried to poison me. Someone really tried to make you very sick at a very specific time. Nathan, this wasn't random. This was planned. I thought about the timing. The meeting at 2 p.m., the way everyone seemed surprised when I showed up healthy, the backup plans and meaningful glances. What do I do now? You call the police. Not yet. I need more evidence. Nathan? I need to understand the full scope of what's happening before I make any moves. But thank you. This helps more than you know. Driving back to the office, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The paranoia was gone, replaced by cold certainty. They'd actually tried to poison me. My own family, or the family I'd married into, had actually tried to chemically incapacitate me to stop me from doing my job. The question now wasn't whether I was being targeted. The question was what I was going to do about it. I thought about Miles's words. When they make their move, you make sure you're ready with a better one. It was time to get ready. Rita Samuel's office was exactly what you'd expect from a lawyer who'd been practicing for 30 years. Dark wood, leather-bound books, and an air of quiet authority that made you want to confess things you hadn't even done. She greeted me with coffee and a concerned expression. You look like you haven't slept, she said, gesturing for me to sit in one of the chairs across from her massive desk. I haven't. Rita, I need to understand exactly what power I have at Pryce Industries. She pulled out a thick file and opened it. Well, according to your employment contract and the agreement signed when you joined the board, you have significant authority. Signature power for contracts up to $50 million. Voting rights equal to any other board member, and... She paused, flipping through pages. Interesting. I'd forgotten about this clause. What clause? Section 12B. In the event of a contract dispute or competing interests between Pryce Industries and any affiliated company, you have final arbitration authority. I felt something click into place. Affiliated company, like Pryce Holdings? Walter's company, yes. This was inserted at Lauren's insistence during the contract negotiations. She said it was to protect your interests in case of family conflicts. Lauren had protected me, even while her family was planning to undermine me. The irony was almost too much to bear. Rita, hypothetically speaking, if I had evidence that board members were conspiring against me, what would be my options? Her expression sharpened. What kind of evidence? I told her about the poisoned lunch, about the pattern of exclusion, about the way everyone seemed to expect me to miss yesterday's meeting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Nathan, these are serious allegations. If you're right, we're talking about conspiracy, possibly attempted assault. You could pursue criminal charges. But the Pryce family has resources and connections you don't. A legal battle could destroy you financially and professionally, even if you win. So what do you suggest? Document everything. Build an ironclad case, and when you're ready to move, make sure it's decisive. I spent the rest of the morning reviewing my employment contracts and board agreements. The more I read, the more I realized how much power I actually had, power I'd never used because I'd been too busy trying to fit in to assert my authority. That afternoon, I decided to visit Pryce Holdings, Walter's company. I'd only been there once before, shortly after joining the family, and I remembered it as a smaller operation than Pryce Industries, but profitable in its own right. The receptionist, a young woman named Tracy, recognized me immediately. "Mr. Keller. What a surprise. Are you here to see Mr. Pryce?" "Actually, I'm just doing some research on potential partnerships. Mind if I look around?" "Of course. Let me give you the tour." As we walked through the offices, I paid attention to the conversations I could overhear. What I heard sent a chill straight through me. Contract should be finalized by next week. Once Nathan's out of the picture. Walter's been planning this for months? In Walter's office, which Tracy proudly showed off, I saw documents on his desk. One was a contract proposal with Hartwell Industries, the same company I'd signed with yesterday. But this contract was different. The terms were less favorable to Hartwell, but more profitable for the Pryce family. "Mr. Pryce has been working on some exciting new deals," Tracy said proudly. "I can see that. Very impressive." But it wasn't impressive. It was damning. Walter had been planning to steal the Hartwell contract all along. My poisoning wasn't just about getting me out of the way for one meeting. It was about positioning his company to swoop in when I failed to show up. That evening, I met Miles and Sylvie at a quiet bar downtown. I'd asked Sylvie to join us because I trusted her judgment and because she'd been observing the office dynamics longer than anyone. "Okay," Miles said after I'd brought them up to speed. "Let's think about this strategically. They tried to poison you to steal a contract. What's their next move?" "They'll try to marginalize me," Sylvie said. "Make me irrelevant." Walter mentioned adjustments to my role. "And after that?" "They'll push me out entirely. Probably claim I'm not suited for the family business." "So we need to move first," Miles said. "The question is how." Sylvie leaned forward. "Nathan, that arbitration clause Rita mentioned, could you use it to redirect the Hartwell contract?" "What do you mean?" "Well, if Walter's company tries to interfere with your contract, couldn't you arbitrate in favor of someone else?" Miles grinned. "Someone like Barrett Consulting?" The idea was audacious. Use my arbitration power to award the contract to my own side business instead of either Pryce company. It would be legal, justified by their attempted sabotage, and absolutely devastating to both Walter and Evelyn. That's brilliant," I said, "but I'd need proof of the conspiracy first." "What kind of proof?" Sylvie asked. "Documentation. Communications between Walter and Evelyn. Evidence of the planned contract theft." "Leave that to me," Sylvie said. "I have access to the company email system, and Victor Nash is terrible at digital security." Over the next few days, Sylvie worked her magic. She found email chains between Victor, Walter, and Evelyn discussing the Nathan problem. She discovered calendar entries for meetings I'd never been told about. Most damning of all, she found a draft press release announcing the transition of the Hartwell contract to Pryce Holdings due to unforeseen circumstances at Pryce Industries. The press release was dated the day before my meeting, before they knew whether their poisoning plan would work. "They were so confident," Sylvie said, showing me the documents in my office. "They actually had the paperwork ready." I saved everything to my private cloud storage. The emails, the calendar entries, the draft press release, the medical report about the poisoned lunch. It was enough to destroy them if I played it right. But I needed one more piece, the contract itself. The Hartwell deal had a clause allowing for arbitration in case of disputes, and I had the authority to invoke it. If I could prove that Walter's company had interfered with the original agreement, I could legally redirect the contract. That's when Rita called with interesting news. Nathan, I've been reviewing the Hartwell contract, and there's something you should know. The arbitration clause isn't just theoretical, it's been triggered. What do you mean? Walter's company filed a complaint this morning, claiming that Pryce Industries doesn't have the resources to fulfill the contract terms. They're requesting arbitration to transfer the deal to Pryce Holdings. I felt a surge of satisfaction. They'd walked right into my trap. When is the arbitration hearing? Next Friday. And Nathan, as the designated arbitrator, you'll be the one making the decision. Perfect. That night, Lauren tried one more time to get me to back down. Nathan, she said as we got ready for bed, I know things have been tense lately. Maybe it would be better if you took a step back from the company for a while. A step back? Just temporarily, until things calm down. Things will never calm down, Lauren. Your family will never accept me, and you'll never stand up to them. She started crying then. Not the careful, hidden tears I'd been seeing, but real, ugly sobs that shook her whole body. You don't understand, she said. It's not that simple. Then explain it to me. I can't. I'm sorry, Nathan. I'm so sorry for everything. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then I remembered the poisoned lunch, the conspiracy, the years of being treated like an unwelcome guest in my own life. Since I'm sorry, too, I said. The arbitration hearing was set for Friday at 2 p.m., the same time as the original meeting where they'd tried to poison me. The symmetry was perfect. I spent the week preparing my presentation. Not just the legal arguments, but the revelation. The moment when I would expose everything they'd done and watch their world crumble. Miles had everything ready on his end. Barrett Consulting was prepared to take over the Hartwell contract immediately. The paperwork was filed, the resources were in place, and the legal justification was airtight. Are you sure about this? He asked the night before the hearing. Once you do this, there's no going back. I've been thinking about that, I said. And you know what I realized? There was never any going back. They made sure of that when they decided I was disposable. Friday morning, I woke up early and put on my best suit, the one Lauren had bought me for our wedding. It seemed appropriate somehow. At breakfast, Evelyn was unusually cheerful. Big day today, she said, not bothering to hide her satisfaction. I'm sure everything will work out for the best. I'm sure it will, I agreed. Walter clapped me on the shoulder as I left for work. Don't take it personally, son. Business is business. You're absolutely right, I said. Business is business. At the office, the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Victor Nash was practically bouncing with excitement. The staff whispered in corners, and I caught fragments about finally and about time and what he deserves. They had no idea what I deserved, but they were about to find out. The morning of the arbitration hearing, I arrived at the office early. The building was quiet, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of the cleaning crew finishing their rounds. I sat in my office, looking out at the city skyline, and felt a strange sense of peace. For 6 years, I'd been playing defense, trying to prove myself worthy, trying to earn acceptance, trying to be the son-in-law they wanted instead of the man I was. Today, that ended. Sylvie knocked on my door at 8 a.m. sharp. Ready for this? She asked, setting a cup of coffee on my desk. More ready than I've ever been for anything. I've got the final documents, she said, handing me a folder. Victor was sloppy with his email again. He sent Walter a message this morning saying, looking forward to seeing Nathan's face when he realizes he's been outplayed. I laughed. Actually laughed. The hubris is incredible. There's more. Evelyn booked a celebration dinner for tonight, made reservations for the whole family at Le Bernardin. They're that confident? They think you're weak, Nathan. They think 6 years of conditioning has broken you. Maybe it did break the old me, I said, but the old me was trying to be someone I'm not. Miles arrived at 10 a.m. to go over our final strategy. Barrett Consulting had everything in place to take over the Hartwell contract. The transition would be seamless, and the legal justification was bulletproof. The beauty of this, Miles said, is that they created the perfect conditions for their own destruction. The arbitration clause, the documented conspiracy, the attempted sabotage, they handed you everything you need. What about the financial impact? Devastating. Pryce Holdings was counting on this contract to secure a major loan. Without it, they'll be in serious trouble, and Pryce Industries will lose credibility for failing to maintain control of their own deals. And Walter and Evelyn? Walter will likely lose his company. Evelyn's position on the Pryce Industries board will become untenable. Their reputation in the industry will be destroyed. I should have felt guilty about that. These were people I'd called family for 6 years. But then I remembered the lunch, the poison, the years of casual cruelty disguised as concern. Good, I said. At noon, I had lunch with Rita to go over the legal presentation one final time. You understand this will likely end your marriage, she said over her salad. My marriage ended when Lauren chose her family over me. I just didn't want to admit it. And you're prepared for the fallout. The Pryce family has connections throughout the industry. Let them use those connections. I'm done caring what they think. Rita smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in years of professional interactions. Good for you, Nathan. I've been waiting 6 years for you to find your spine. Did it really take that long? Longer. I was starting to think you never would. At 1 p.m., I returned to the office for the final preparations. The boardroom was being set up for the hearing, tables arranged, documents prepared, recording equipment tested. The Hartwell representatives would attend via video conference, and a court reporter would document everything for legal purposes. Victor Nash was practically glowing as he supervised the setup. Nathan, he called out when he saw me. Ready for your big moment? Absolutely. I have to admire your composure. Most people would be nervous about what's coming. I'm exactly where I want to be, Victor. He laughed, thinking I was delusional. We'll see about that. At 1:30, the participants began arriving. Walter entered with his legal team, looking every inch the confident CEO. Evelyn followed, wearing her most expensive suit and a smile that could cut glass. The Hartwell representatives appeared on the video screen, looking professional and slightly bored. Lauren was there too, sitting in the back row with the other observers. She looked pale and nervous, her hands twisted in her lap. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, standing at the head of the table, thank you all for attending this arbitration hearing regarding the Hartwell Industries contract. As the designated arbitrator, I'll be reviewing the complaint filed by Pryce Holdings and making a final determination on contract assignment. Walter's lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Kenneth Reeves, presented their case first. They argued that Pryce Industries lacked the resources and stability to fulfill the contract terms, that there were questions about management competence, and that Pryce Holdings was better positioned to serve Hartwell's interests. It was a professional presentation, well-researched and persuasive. If I hadn't known the truth behind it, I might have been impressed. Thank you, Mr. Reeves, I said when he finished. Now I'd like to present some additional evidence for consideration. Walter's confident expression flickered slightly. This wasn't part of the script. I activated the projector and began with the email chains Sylvie had discovered. These communications, dated over the past 3 months, show a coordinated effort by Pryce Holdings and certain Pryce Industries board members to undermine the original contract signing. The first email appeared on screen. It was from Victor to Walter. Nathan's meeting is scheduled for Tuesday at 2 p.m. If he's not there, the contract defaults to arbitration. Walter's face went white. Evelyn's smile disappeared entirely. The next email, I continued, shows advanced planning for today's hearing. Victor to Evelyn. The arbitration is a formality. Nathan doesn't have the backbone to rule against the family. Murmurs rippled through the room. The Hartwell representatives leaned forward, suddenly very interested. But the most damning evidence, I said, relates to an attempt to prevent me from attending the original contract signing. I displayed the medical report about the poisoned lunch, the timeline showing when it was prepared and when the meeting was scheduled, and the draft press release announcing the contract transfer, dated before they knew whether I would be present. The room erupted. Walter's lawyer was frantically whispering to his client. Evelyn sat frozen, her face a mask of horror. Lauren was crying openly now. Based on this evidence, I continued, my voice cutting through the chaos, I find that Pryce Holdings has engaged in deliberate interference with the original contract through conspiracy, sabotage, and attempted assault. Therefore, I am invoking my authority under Section 12B of the arbitration agreement. Walter found his voice. Nathan, wait. Let's discuss this. The discussion is over, I said. I hereby rule that the Hartwell Industries contract is transferred from Pryce Industries to Barrett Consulting, effective immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. Then everyone started talking at once. This is outrageous, Victor shouted. You can't do this. Walter slammed his hand on the table. Actually, Rita said, standing up with a stack of legal documents, he can. The arbitration clause gives him full authority to reassign the contract based on evidence of interference. Mr. Barrett's company meets all the qualifications and has been pre-approved by Hartwell Industries. Harold Hartwell's voice came through the video conference. We're satisfied with this arrangement. Barrett Consulting's proposal is actually superior to both previous options. Walter's empire was crumbling in real time. Without the Hartwell contract, Pryce Holdings couldn't secure their pending loan. The company would likely fold within months. Evelyn's position on the Pryce Industries board was now completely untenable. She'd be forced to resign in disgrace. But I wasn't finished. "There's one more matter to address," I said. "Given the evidence of conspiracy and attempted assault, I'm forwarding this case to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation." Evelyn finally found her voice. "Nathan, please, think about what you're doing. Think about Lauren. Think about the family." I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years, without trying to see something that wasn't there. "I am thinking about family," I said. "I'm thinking about how you tried to poison me. I'm thinking about how you planned to steal a contract I'd worked 6 months to negotiate. I'm thinking about how you've spent 6 years treating me like an unwelcome guest in my own life." "We can work this out," Walter said desperately. "We can come to an arrangement." "The arrangement is over," I said, "all of it." I turned to the court reporter. "Please note that as of this moment, I am resigning from my position at Pryce Industries and divesting myself of all family business interests." Lauren stood up suddenly, her face streaked with tears. "Nathan, please, don't do this. Don't leave me." For a moment, I felt something. Not love exactly, but the memory of love. The ghost of what we might have been if circumstances had been different. "You left me a long time ago, Lauren," I said gently. "You just never told me." She collapsed back into her chair, sobbing. The hearing was officially over, but the real damage was just beginning. Within hours, news of the contract transfer and the criminal investigation would spread through the industry. The Pryce family's reputation would be destroyed. Walter's company would collapse. Evelyn would be forced into exile from the business world she'd dominated for decades. And I would be free. As the room emptied, Evelyn approached me one last time. Her composure was completely gone now, her face twisted with rage and desperation. "You have no idea what you've done," she hissed. "No idea what this will cost." "I know exactly what it will cost," I said. "Everything you tried to take from me." She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact moment when she realized that the quiet, accommodating son-in-law she'd dismissed for 6 years had never really existed. The man standing in front of her was someone else entirely, someone she'd created through years of casual cruelty and calculated dismissal. "You always focused on the pretty wrapping," I said, echoing the fortune-teller's words. "You never bothered to see what was inside." The boardroom had cleared except for Walter, Evelyn, and me. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Walter's face had gone through several color changes, white with shock, red with anger, and now a sickly gray as the full implications hit him. Evelyn sat rigid in her chair, her perfectly manicured hands clenched into fists on the mahogany table. 6 years, Walter said finally, his voice hoarse. 6 years we welcomed you into this family, gave you opportunities you never could have earned on your own, and this is how you repay us? I almost laughed. "Welcomed me? Is that what you call it?" "We gave you everything," Evelyn said, her voice shaking with rage. "A position, a purpose, a place in something bigger than yourself." "You gave me a role to play," I corrected. "The grateful outsider, the convenient scapegoat, the temporary solution until something better came along." "That's not," Walter started. "It's exactly that." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. "Would you like me to play the conversation I recorded last month? The one where you discussed my temporary arrangement and how you were looking for someone more suitable?" The color drained from both their faces. They'd forgotten about that dinner conversation, forgotten that I'd returned from my phone call earlier than expected. "You've been planning this?" Evelyn whispered. "How long?" "I've been documenting your behavior for months, but I only started planning this after you tried to poison me." Walter slammed his hand on the table. "It wasn't poison. It was just what? Just enough ipecac to leave me seriously unwell during the most important meeting of my career? Just enough to force me to miss the contract signing so you could swoop in with your backup plan?" The silence that followed was admission enough. "Did you really think I was that stupid?" I continued. "Did you really think I wouldn't figure out that the timing was too convenient? That everyone's surprise at seeing me healthy was too obvious?" Evelyn's mask finally slipped completely. "You ungrateful little worm. We made you. Without us, you're nothing." "You're right," I said. "Without you, I'm nothing. I'm not the disappointing son-in-law. I'm not the convenient punching bag. I'm not the outsider desperately trying to prove himself worthy. I'm just Nathan Keller, and that's exactly who I want to be." "You'll regret this," Walter said, standing up with as much dignity as he could muster. The industry is smaller than you think. We have connections, influence. Had, I corrected. Past tense. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know that the great Walter Pryce tried to steal a contract through conspiracy and attempted poisoning. Your connections won't return your calls. And what about Lauren? Evelyn asked, playing her last card. What about your wife? Our daughter? For the first time since the hearing began, I felt a pang of genuine sadness. Lauren made her choice years ago. She chose you over me, over and over again. She chose silence over support, family loyalty over marital loyalty. I can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. She loves you, Evelyn said desperately. She loves the idea of me, the project I represented, the chance to prove she could make a marriage work despite her family's interference. But she doesn't love me enough to stand up for me, and I don't love her enough to keep accepting that. I gathered my papers and stood up. The criminal complaint will be filed Monday morning. I suggest you get very good lawyers. Nathan, Walter called out as I reached the door. Whatever you think we did, we're still family. I turned back to look at them one last time. This man and woman who had shaped my life for 6 years through their casual cruelty and calculated manipulation. No, I said, we never were. I walked out of that boardroom and out of Pryce Industries forever. In the elevator, I called Miles. It's done, I said. How do you feel? Free. That evening, I went home to pack. Lauren was waiting in our bedroom, sitting on the bed we'd shared for 5 years, surrounded by the remnants of a life that had never really been mine. I heard, she said without looking up. Victor called. He told me everything. I'm sure his version was very different from what actually happened. Was it true? Did they really try to poison you? Yes. She was quiet for a long time. I knew something was wrong. Mother was so insistent about making you lunch that morning, and she's never cared about things like that. But you didn't warn me. I didn't know for sure. I thought maybe I was being paranoid. Or maybe you didn't want to know for sure. She started crying again, the same desperate sobs I'd heard so many times over the past few months. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Nathan. I should have stood up for you. I should have protected you. Yes, I said simply. You should have. Can you forgive me? Can we try again? I'll be different, I promise. I sat down beside her on the bed and took her hand. It was soft and perfectly manicured, like everything else in her life. Lauren, I need you to understand something. This isn't about forgiveness. This is about the fact that we want different things. You want a marriage that fits into your family's world. I want a marriage that stands apart from it. Those two things are incompatible. But I love you. I know you do, and I love you too, in my way, but love isn't always enough. What happens now? Now I pack my things and move out. Now you file for divorce. Now we both try to build lives that actually make us happy. And my parents? Your parents will face the consequences of their actions. That's not my responsibility anymore. I packed one suitcase with clothes and personal items. Everything else, the expensive furniture, the art, the symbols of wealth I'd never really wanted, I left behind. They belonged to a life I was done living. As I reached the front door, Lauren called out one last time, Nathan, what you did today, was it worth it? I thought about that question for a moment. Was destroying the people who tried to destroy me worth the cost? Was revenge worth the pain of ending a marriage, even a broken one? Ask me in a year, I said. The next morning, I woke up in a hotel room downtown. My phone was buzzing with calls from reporters, lawyers, and colleagues. The story was already spreading through the business community, the quiet son-in-law who'd brought down one of the city's most powerful families. Miles called at 8 a.m. You're famous, he said. The Times is running a story about corporate family dynasties and internal corruption. You're the lead example. How's Barrett Consulting handling the attention? We're drowning in new business inquiries. Apparently there's something appealing about a company that stands up to bullies. By noon, Walter's company had lost its primary loan backing. By evening, 3 board members at Pryce Industries had called for Evelyn's resignation. By the end of the week, the district attorney had opened a formal investigation into the poisoning incident. I didn't follow the details obsessively. I didn't need to. I'd lit the fuse. The explosion would happen with or without my attention. Instead, I focused on building something new. Barrett Consulting expanded rapidly with the Hartwell contract as our flagship account. We hired Sylvie away from Pryce Industries, along with several other talented people who'd been marginalized by the family's politics. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new office, smaller than the one at Pryce Industries, but entirely mine, when Rita called. "Thought you'd want to know," she said. "Walter's company filed for bankruptcy yesterday. Evelyn resigned from the Pryce Industries board last week, and Lauren filed the divorce papers this morning. How is she?" "Honestly, I think she's relieved. The family pressure is gone, and she can finally figure out who she is without their expectations." "Good for her." "And Nathan?" "The criminal charges were dropped. Not enough evidence to prove intent to cause serious harm, but the civil suit is moving forward." "I don't need their money, Rita." "I know. But sometimes it's important to make people pay for their actions, even if you don't need the compensation." That evening, I was walking to my apartment when I saw a familiar figure at the bus stop. The fortune teller, Tessa, was sitting on the bench with her colorful scarves and knowing eyes. "Nathan Keller," she said as I approached. "You look different." "I feel different." "Good. You were carrying too much weight before. Other people's expectations are heavy." "How did you know?" I asked. "That morning, how did you know about the lunch?" She smiled mysteriously. "Some people focus on the pretty wrapping. Others learn to see what's hidden underneath. You just needed to remember which kind of person you really are." "Are you really a fortune teller?" "Does it matter? I told you the truth when you needed to hear it. Sometimes that's enough." She stood up and started to walk away, then paused. "Nathan, the girl you married, she's going to be fine. And so are you. Different kinds of fine, but fine nonetheless." I watched her disappear into the crowd, and for the first time in years, I felt genuinely at peace. A year later, Barrett Consulting was one of the fastest-growing firms in the city. Miles and I had built something real, something that belonged to us, rather than being handed down or inherited. Sylvie had become our head of operations, and we'd created a company culture based on competence rather than connections. I never saw the Pryce family again. I heard through industry gossip that Walter had taken a job with a small firm in another state, that Evelyn had moved to Florida and was living quietly on her savings, that Lauren had started her own nonprofit and seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, but no regret either. They'd made their choices, and I'd made mine. The morning of the one-year anniversary of the arbitration hearing, I was reviewing contracts in my office when my assistant buzzed me. "Mr. Keller? There's someone here to see you. Says she's from Hartwell Industries." A moment later, a woman in an expensive suit walked into my office. She was tall, confident, and had the kind of presence that commanded attention. "Mr. Keller," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Diana Hartwell, CEO of Hartwell Industries." I stood up, surprised. "Ms. Hartwell, this is unexpected." "I wanted to meet the man who caused such an interesting disruption in our business relationship." "I hope the transition to Barrett Consulting has been smooth?" "More than smooth. Exceptional. Which is why I'm here." She sat down across from my desk. "We're expanding into new markets, and we need a consulting firm that can handle complex, high-stakes projects. Are you interested?" "Very. Good. Because I have a particular appreciation for people who stand up to bullies, even when those bullies are family." As she outlined the new contract, worth 3 times the original Pryce deal, I thought about that morning a year ago when Evelyn had handed me a perfectly wrapped lunch. How that single moment of malice had set in motion a chain of events that destroyed her world and created mine. "There's one thing I'm curious about," Diana said as we shook hands on the deal. "Do you ever regret it? Taking down your own family?" I thought about Lauren's question from that final night. Was it worth it? Now I knew the answer. "They were never my family," I said. "This is." I gestured around the office. At the photos of our team, the awards we'd earned, the evidence of something we'd built through competence and integrity rather than inheritance and manipulation. "This is my family, and yes, it was worth it," Diana smiled. "I think we're going to work very well together, Mr. Keller." As she left, I sat back in my chair and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Evelyn Pryce was living with the consequences of her actions. Somewhere out there, Walter was trying to rebuild a career he'd destroyed through greed and arrogance. And somewhere out there, a fortune teller was probably sitting at a bus stop, helping someone else see past the pretty wrapping to the truth underneath. I opened my laptop and started working on the Hartwell proposal. There was no time for reflection or regret. There was only the future I was building, one decision at a time. The pretty wrapping was gone. What remained was exactly what I'd always been underneath. Nathan Keller, standing on his own, answerable to no one but himself. And that was more than enough. The boardroom erupted in chaos as Evelyn Pryce watched 6 years of careful planning crumble in real time. her face a mask of horror as Nathan signed the contract that would destroy everything she'd tried to protect. And in that moment of absolute devastation, she finally understood that the quiet man she'd dismissed as weak had been the strongest person in the room all along.